In my last video, I showed how you can use your investments to take an income and pay almost no tax at all by maximising little-known allowances. Accounts like ISAs are already tax-free, of course, but a £20,000 annual contribution limit isn't much use if you've got a much larger lump sum to invest and you want to extract growth from that tax efficiently in the future. So the method I laid out is very useful for large lump sum investments, or if you're one of those people who's restricted on how much you can pay into a pension. But if you can pay into a pension, should you? Or in light of the ability to pay less tax when withdrawing from other types of accounts, are they better options? That's what we're looking at today, and I'm going to show you some results that may shock you. Remember, you can now access all the fantastic tools I'll be using in this video to improve confidence in your own financial planning with my cash flow modelling courses, which are linked in the description below. But without further ado, let's jump straight into it. So what we're looking at here is a scenario where we've got a single person, Mr. Luke Rativ, whose self-employed business has just started to take off. They haven't really been in a position to save or invest much previously, but now they are, and they want to know how to do it in the best way possible. Now let's say that Luke has set himself a target of £1.5 million that he wants to reach by age 60 at the latest. When he gets to that figure, he feels he'll have as much as he needs to kick back and take it a bit easier. We'll talk about how inflation might impact this a little later. But in the meantime, what we can do in Voyant is set a goal to reach a target retirement net worth of £1.5 million. As we can see here in the base plan, the target figure is shown, and we've got a progress bar that indicates we're 61% towards achieving that goal at age 60. This is based on Luke earning £100k a year before tax and having expenditure of £45,000 a year. So the excess amount is available for saving or investing. And we can see if we hover over this first year here, that the excess amount is projected to be £23,108 after tax deductions are accounted for. The projected amount will change slightly as we move across the years because his income and his expenditure are expected to increase. So all that's happening in this base plan scenario is that the excess income is being swept into a cash account earning minimal interest. If that's all that Luke did, he would get 61% towards his target. If we change this to look at the assets chart here, we can see he'd be on target to amass £934,000 in savings by age 60. Important to say here, of course, that any numbers in Voyant are just projections. They're not guaranteed amounts. They will either be higher or lower than what's shown here. But of course, he wants to find a better solution than just allowing cash to accumulate in a savings account. So we create what-if scenarios to test the effectiveness of different options. One option would be to utilise the maximum ISA allowance of £20,000 a year, with the remainder swept into a general investment account. So if we choose that what-if scenario, and we select year view here, we can actually look at the numbers that sit behind the chart. And if I select investments, we can see that 20,000 is going into the ISA, with the remaining 3,108 going into the GIA. And we've assumed the return on the underlying investment funds is 4.5% a year. If we drag this selection across the years, we can see these figures increasing through continuing contributions and compound growth, until we get right to the end, where we can see a combined projected total of around £1.4 million. So now, if we go to Dashboard and we click on Goals again, we can see this reflected here, where we're now told that we'd be 93% towards achieving the target at age 60. It would take just another couple of years to hit 100%. But how does that compare with paying the excess income into a pension? Well, let's have a look at that in this what-if scenario. If we go straight to goals now, we can see that not only have we hit the target, we've smashed straight through it, and we're projected to be 154% to target at age 60. If we look at the numbers behind this, we can start to understand why. In the first year, the proposed pension would have £28,886 paid into it. Now that's quite a bit more than the 23,000 that was paid into ISAs and GIAs. And the difference is, of course, tax relief. HMRC will effectively add in the basic rate tax that would have been taken on the income straight away. That has the effect of increasing the contribution by 25%. A lot of people think it's 20% that's added, but it's not, it's actually 25%. And the reason is that 20% tax would have been taken from the income in the first place. And the idea of tax relief is to reinstate the position you would have been in before that tax was taken, which would then require a 25% uplift to get you back to the gross position again, as you can see on screen now. So if we move this slider across, we can see the gross contribution increasing and increasing with the same growth rate of 4.5% assumed, until in the latter years of the plan, where Luke is actually hitting the maximum pension contribution, which is currently £60,000 a year. Now in those years where the pension is maxed out, I've illustrated that Luke will then mop up the excess in an ISA, and that is then projected to be worth around £112,000 by the end of the plan. But the pension is projected to be worth 2.2 million, hence us being 154% to target. We're also helped by the fact that Luke is a higher rate taxpayer. So he doesn't just get the basic rate tax relief at source, he's entitled to a refund of the full 40% rate on the contributions that he pays. So if we click on details, we can actually see these little tax credits, the purple bit on top of each bar, coming into the plan annually. So in fact, if we switch this to look at the assets chart, we can see that we're actually projected to hit the £1.5 million target at age 54. The only downside would of course be that Luke wouldn't be able to stop work at that time if pretty much all of his money was in a pension, because he'd be too young. If the rules remain the same as currently proposed, the earliest he could access the pension money would be age 57. And that's why we still aim to have eggs in different baskets to cover all bases. Now, I did say earlier on that 1.5 million might be the target that Luke has in mind now, but we have to consider inflation. The total projected value of the plan might be 2.44 million at age 60. But if we click here and select real money, we can see what the actual spending power of that would be in the future. So now, if we hover over age 60, we can see that the total figure has dropped to £1.28 million. Effectively, £2.44 million in 25 years' time will buy you as much as 1.28 million will today. And the shocking thing is that that assumes just 2.5% annual inflation compounded. So Luke may decide that he needs to carry on a little bit longer at that point, or he might well think that a pot of nearly 1.3 million in today's terms is enough at that time. That would be a choice he'd have the luxury of making. But there we can see beyond any real doubt that a pension would obliterate any other account as a passive retirement investment vehicle, whether that be an ISA, a GIA, an onshore or an offshore bond. If you have the ability to contribute regularly over many years, a pension is going to be king, because it will simply allow you to build up much more money than an alternative vehicle. Like I demonstrated in my last video though, that's not always possible. Some people have heavily restricted pension contribution allowances because they earn too much, or they receive lump sums of money through inheritances or equity sales. To understand how you can still be tax efficient in those scenarios, refer to that previous video. Now, some of you may be thinking it's all well and good the pension being worth more, but you're also going to have to pay far more tax to access the money than you would through an ISA or other vehicle. So those vehicles will eventually catch up. Well, it's absolutely true that if you had the same amount of money in just a pension than you had spread across different investment vehicles, the gross withdrawal required from those accounts to get to the same net income level from a pension would be far less. You'd therefore protect much more of your capital in those different vehicles when you're in the withdrawal phase. But how much would you catch up with a pension that starts off being worth more over time? Well, let's have a look. In this scenario, based on saving into the ISA and GIA, I've created a new goal for a net retirement income of £45,000 a year, the same as the current level of expenditure. Of course, adjusting upwards for inflation, that would be more like £83,000 in 25 years' time. And we can see that if this was our target, we wouldn't be 100% there. we'd be able to meet the need in 27 years out of 30. And we can also see that illustrated on the chart with this shortfall showing in the final 3 years. This assumes that a full state pension commences at age 68, by the way. Let's compare that then to the pension retirement scenario. This is a comparison view with the ISA GIA scenario shown on this half of the screen and the pension scenario shown on this half. We can see immediately that there's no shortfall. So based on the same net income requirement, the pension is expected to last for the entirety of the timeline, which runs up until age 90, whereas the other investments aren't. If we switch this to an assets chart comparison, the contrast is stark. You're expected to run out of capital completely in the non-pension scenario at age 87, whereas you'd be projected to hold £2.38 million in the pension scenario at that time. A vast difference, I'm sure you'll agree. If we compared projected annual taxes, yes, as you can see, you would be paying more tax in retirement on the pension. At age 67 here, we're expected to be paying £10,600 in tax on the pension withdrawals, which will only grow throughout the remainder of retirement. And we're expected to be paying nothing at all from that point onwards in the ISA GIA scenario, because the withdrawals would be coming out of the tax-free ISA wrapper. But it doesn't matter. We'd never catch up with the pension. The really interesting thing is this though. Keep an eye on the cumulative tax figures of the two scenarios. At the time of retirement, the projections show that around £300,000 less has been paid in tax in the pension scenario than the non-pension scenario. That all comes down to the tax relief and the rebates received. Less tax has been paid because a good portion of it has been refunded. It's not until we get right across here to around age 81 that the cumulative figure overtakes in this scenario. And that is why so much more capital is protected. So hopefully that comprehensively quashes any illusion you may be under that other vehicles can beat the sheer power of tax relief on pensions. Let me know what, if any of that, has surprised you in the comments below. Or if you don't agree, or you think I've missed something. I always like to read your comments and I try to get back to all of them. Remember that you're able to access the fantastic tools I've demonstrated in this video with my Voyant Masterclass courses, linked in the description below. I think Voyant is the most powerful system available to create robust financial plans and projections. You can literally forecast any scenario you can think of and test it against another to determine the probability of getting the best outcome. You can create more realistic growth profiles by overlaying periods of historic stock market performance. You can change inflation parameters. You can gain specific insights like what's your spending capacity and what is your loss capacity. Anything you can think of to increase confidence in your planning. As always, I hope that's been helpful, guys, and I'll see you next time.